Brigadier Romail Dhaya, the Deputy Director, IDSA, eminent delegates from all over the world, senior officers, excellencies, distinguished guests, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen. It is indeed a distinct honor and a proud privilege for me to be present here today for the 17th Asian Security Conference organized by the IDSA. At the very outset, I would like to congratulate the IDSA for scoring half a century, remaining not out, and continuing to battle on. Over the last 50 years, the Institute of Defence Studies and Analyses has shaped and indeed articulated the strategic perspective, has played a pioneering role as far as strategic thinking is concerned, and has also inculcated the strategic culture in this country. It has reached out to think tanks both in Asia and all over the world, and has played a significant role in comprehension of strategic and security issues, including aspects of the Indian approach. It's a great pleasure and an honor for me, therefore, to inaugurate this session of the Asian Security Conference, the theme of which has been very aptly chosen: the Asian security in the 21st century, comprehending the Indian approach. And I will cover aspects related to the maritime perspective. Our planet, the Earth, is called the Blue Planet because of the very significant dominance of the maritime domain. We are all aware that over 70% of the Earth's surface is covered by water. Nearly 80% of humanity lives within 200 nautical miles of the coast, and 90% of the trade is transacted by the seas. When we relate this to the Asian perspective, what do we find? We find that the countries of the Asian region have a maritime perspective and a maritime unique location with a natural outflow towards the seas. And they have vast maritime interests. Each of these are related to their economic growth and have linkages which are very vital to the blue economy. We also witness that there is a global attention shifting towards a resurgent Asia, and that is the environment which is prevailing in the Asian region today. The seas around Asia have been the vortex of intense maritime activity over centuries. The seas have been a unifying factor in history and have resulted in movement and spread of religion, culture, and trade across the entire region. The Indus Valley civilization, which existed in the western part of India, dates back to 3300 BC. Even today in India, we have dry docks at Lothal in Gujarat, which date back to 2200 BC. And it is from these ports that seafarers sailed to distant lands of Mesopotamia, ancient Egypt, and east coast of Africa to spread trade and cultural links. On the eastern shores of India, we had the seafaring kingdoms of the Kalingas, the Cholas, Pandyas, and the Cheryas, who sailed off again to spread cultural and trade links with many countries which are part of Southeast Asia today. And it's not surprising to find India's cultural heritage even present today in some of these Southeast Asian countries. This was also the period where we saw great amount of trade and prosperity among the Asian nations. Today, in the last few decades, we have witnessed a resurgence in the whole of Asia. Currently, 3 of the top 4 economies in the world are Asian. The countries of Asia are home to nearly 2/3 of the entire human population in the world. It also has the concentration of the largest military forces in the world. And what more, the seas around and the Asian region is very rich both in oil as well as minerals, and can virtually be called the energy heartland, both in terms of supply as well as in demand. We also have an aspect that the drivers of global economy are steadily but slowly shifting from the West to Asia. The Indian Ocean region itself, which is the third largest water body in the world, covering an area of 68.5 million square kilometers, has emerged as the world's global economic highway. 66% of the world's oil, 50% of the world's container traffic, 33% of the world's cargo traffic passes through the waters of the Indian Ocean. And these figures, where nearly 1 billion tons of oil is transacted every year, are likely to grow in the coming years. The Indian Ocean is also unique when compared to the other two larger water bodies of Pacific and the Atlantic. As we are all aware, it is virtually landlocked on three sides, and the entry and exit is largely from the south, or indeed from the choke point, the Strait of Bab el-Mandeb, the Strait of Hormuz, the Strait of Malacca, Lombok and Sunda. Another unique factor is that 80% of the oil and trade which emanates in the Indian Ocean region is largely extra-regional in nature. When we compare this with the figures of Atlantic and Pacific, we find the figures are just about reversed. What are the implications? This implies that if there is any disruption in the free flow of oil or trade through this region, it will have a detrimental impact not just on the economies of the region, but the global economies as well. It is evident, therefore, that the seas around us are gaining newfound importance as each day goes by, and I have no doubt that the current century is the century of the seas. With geostrategic and the global economic shift taking place towards Asia, this century may well be called the Asian century as well. Therefore, security, stability and safety of the waters around Asia is the key to peace and prosperity of all nations in the region. Moving on to emerging maritime and security challenges, I would like to say that they are as wide and varied as they come. Who could have ever imagined that in the 21st century we would once again be grappling with pirates, or that the major threat in the maritime domain would be from asymmetric warfare and indeed maritime terrorism? But the fact is that piracy has impacted a great deal on global trade as well as the economy of various countries. Just taking the aspect related to piracy in the Gulf of Aden of Somalia itself, we have 40,000 ships transiting through those waters every year, and this has had a tremendous impact on the aspects of safety of global trade through this region. As you're all aware, we did have armed robberies in the Malacca Straits a few years ago, but this was very effectively tackled by the countries surrounding the Malacca Straits and the countries of that region. Against piracy in the Gulf of Aden, the world naval community has united and has a very effective cooperation ever since 2008. And consequently, we have various task forces which operate around the Gulf of Aden transit corridor of Somalia and indeed in the Gulf region to provide security to the entire round of ships that transit through these waters. The Indian Navy has been actively employed in anti-piracy operations ever since October 2008. And currently we have our 47th ship in patrol. We carry out actual escort of these ships through the transit corridor, and we have safely escorted nearly 3,000 ships of various nationalities and various flags, on which over 22,000 Indian seafarers have been embarked. With the cooperative engagement and the cooperation by various navies of the world, we have managed to bring down the incidence of piracy a great deal, and the furthest line of piracy, which at one point had come well east into the Indian Ocean, has now been pushed back again as of 2013. And this is another example how the navies of the world can cooperate towards any challenge that may emanate in the global commons. There are many other threats in the maritime arena, which include drug traffickers, armed traffickers, human traffickers, and indeed poachers, which operate in the exclusive economic zone of other countries for illegal poaching of fish and the marine habitat. Combating non-state actors which carry out these illegal activities is not an easy task because of the anonymity of the individual as well as their intent. And the maritime agencies and the navies have very limited policy options to tackle these non-state actors. We also witness, if we see the map of the Asian region, that there has been instability and political turbulence with a large number of hotspots all across the region. These are due to the interstate as well as the intrastate tensions. And the aspect which is very important to note is that these conflicts have potential to spill over to the maritime domain and impact on the trade, the oil flow, and indeed the economies of many countries in the region. The situation, therefore, in the entire region can best be described as fragile. Consequently, we have about 120 warships from nearly 20 extra-regional navies all over the world, which are deployed in the Indian Ocean region to safeguard their maritime interests. The region also is witness to natural disasters. Nearly 70% of the world's natural disasters occur in the Indian Ocean region, and we can say that we have a fair share of these natural disasters coming our way. They impact a great deal on the humanity because we have 40% of the human population in these countries living within 100 kilometers of the coast. All the major economic centers are located on the coast, and therefore trade and development is impacted because of the natural disasters which occur from time to time. You would all be aware of the devastating impact post the tsunami of December 2004 and many other super cyclones which have actually hit the region since then. But it also indicated the unique brotherhood of the seas and the ability of the navies and maritime agencies to cooperate with each other for effective humanitarian assistance and disaster relief. The maritime medium, which is the seas, is amply suited in terms of connectivity and provide the facilities for effective disaster relief because of the flexibility of the ships which can be deployed for disaster relief. And therefore, countries of Asia need to accord a national priority to HADR. Moving on to regional cooperation, the globalization has resulted in a growing vulnerability on the oceans. The seas, therefore, are no longer a benign medium where trade passes from A to B, fishing activity takes place peacefully, or indeed oil and seabed operations take place in individual exclusive economic zone. Today, the threat perception out at sea has become immense, ranging, as I said earlier, from piracy to maritime terrorism. No single navy in the world is robust enough to carry out the vast task of policing or patrolling the global commons by itself. And this is a factor which lends itself to cooperation in the maritime domain among various navies and maritime agencies, because there are no boundaries on the high seas, and it is called the global commons because it is indeed the common sea lines of communication over which the world trade is passing. And therefore, when we talk of maritime cooperation for security of the seas, we talk of interoperability, capacity building, and capability enhancement between various navies of the world and indeed the region. This includes training, joint exercises, joint patrols for interoperability, exclusive economic zone surveillance, carrying out hydrographic cooperation, technical assistance, and indeed the most important prerequisite for maritime cooperation today, which is information sharing. What has become important is that we need to have an effective maritime domain awareness in the waters around us. And that is a prerequisite requirement to have information sharing, which is sharing a common picture of the blue oceans around us, to share the white shipping information, which is the information related to the merchant ship traffic as they move from A to B in terms of the ports they visit, in terms of the cargo they carry. We also have a look at the aspect that we need to have an effective, cooperative, common construct for information sharing and the streaming of automatic identification system data, which is either from a coastal chain of AIS stations or indeed from space-based AIS. But the essence is that sharing of information is a prerequisite, and it's a step towards enhancing and having an effective maritime domain awareness in the waters around us. The Indian Navy has taken some initiatives to strengthen the bridges of friendship across the oceans. And one of the initiatives was to launch the Indian Ocean Naval Symposium in 2008 as a cooperative construct between various navies and as a platform to manage the maritime affairs. The IONS has a membership of 35 littoral navies, with Australia as the current chair, and with the chair likely to move on to Bangladesh in the coming year. The IONS aims to provide a cooperation for evolution of regional maritime security strategies and for the navies to interact with each other, where each navy has a cooperative and a constructive role to play. Another initiative of the Indian Navy is the Milan series of exercises or interactions, which is a biennial event held at Port Blair in the Andaman and Nicobar Islands. It is aimed to enhance the regional cooperation between the navies, to hold formal and informal dialogues, and have an effective cooperative maritime engagement construct between the navies of the region. We had the 9th edition of Milan, which was held in Port Blair in February 2014, a year ago, where 17 navies from various regions participated. India, as we are all aware, is a maritime nation, and the country sits astride busy sea lines of communication over which 100,000 ships transit every year. We have a long coastline of 7,516 kilometers, which houses 12 major and over 200 minor and intermediate ports. We have an exclusive economic zone of over 2 million square kilometers and areas on the west coast of India as well as east coast where we have offshore oil and gas exploration in progress. We have a vibrant shipping industry with 1,071 ships and thereafter totaling to nearly 10,000 million GRT. We have a vibrant shipbuilding industry. We have island territories off the west coast of India in terms of Laccadives and Minicoy, and the Andaman and Nicobar Islands, which actually sit at the mouth of the Malacca Straits, through which 60,000 ships transit every year. These are the vast maritime interests of India, and these are the ones which create a very dense maritime environment in the waters around us. At any given time, we have 4,000 to 5,000 merchant ships, We have over 1,000 coastal vessels, and we have 250,000 fishing boats, of which at least a few thousand or more are operating in the waters at any given time. This creates a very dense maritime environment and needs very effective security initiatives to be taken to ensure both coastal as well as offshore security in the waters around us. This is where the Indian Navy comes in to provide the security umbrella for securing the seas around us for national prosperity. In the 21st century, the Indian Navy has emerged as a multidimensional networked force which is ready to take on any challenges in the Indian Ocean region and is considered a stabilizing force for the Indian Ocean region to ensure the security of the global commons. The Navy has maintained a high operational tempo to discharge all its basic roles of military, diplomatic, constabulary, as well as benign, and carried out operations across the entire spectrum of our roles. In recent months, the Indian Navy has displayed its footprint in the east up to the Western Pacific, in the west, the countries of the Gulf as well as east coast of Africa, and in the south, in the southwest islands of the Indian Ocean. The ships of our Western Fleet proceeded on an overseas deployment to Maldives, Seychelles, Mauritius, Réunion, Madagascar, Kenya, Tanzania, Mozambique, and South Africa, where they participated in the Ipsamar series of exercises between the Indian, Brazilian, and South African navies. The ships of the Southern Command proceeded to countries in the Gulf and visited Oman, UAE, Kuwait, Bahrain, and Saudi Arabia. The ships of the Eastern Fleet proceeded from Visakhapatnam to Vladivostok, where they carried out the Indra series of exercises with the Russian Navy. They then proceeded off Sasebo in Japan, where they carried out the Malabar exercises with the United States Navy, in which the ships of the Japanese Maritime Self-Defense Force also participated. They transited through the South China Sea and visited Philippines and Vietnam. One of our stealth frigates visited Qingdao in China to participate in the Western Pacific Naval Symposium and also carried out exercises with the other navies present there. Our indigenously designed and constructed stealth frigate Sayadri proceeded from Vizag to Hawaii in the Pacific to participate in the RIMPAC series of exercises along with 22 other countries and the navies which were present there. It visited Malaysia, Brunei, as well as Australia on its passage and interacted with navies of the region and enhanced and strengthened the cooperation with the navies of the world. We also carried out coordinated patrols in the Andaman Sea with the navies of Myanmar, Thailand, as well as Indonesia, and this is to secure the safety of the waters between these countries. The aim of all this activities carried out by the Indian Navy is to enhance the cooperation with our littoral neighbors with the aim to maintain peace and stability in the Indian Ocean and the Asian region by implementation of our maritime cooperation roadmap, which has been initiated by the Indian Navy. In conclusion, ladies and gentlemen, as I mentioned, the seas around us are gaining newfound importance as each day goes by because of the linkages with the blue economy, and there is no doubt that the current century is the century of the seas. At the same time, with global and the economic center of gravity shifting to Asia, this may well be the century of Asia as well. The Asian region has evident maritime linkages, and the interest of Asian nations is linked to unhindered free flow of oil and trade through the region. For all this and keeping the waters safe, we need a security umbrella, and that umbrella is provided by the navies and maritime agencies to keep the global commons safe and secure. Accordingly, Asian and global maritime cooperation and networking of navies is emerging as a new order of the 21st century. The navies need to seek to promote peace, security, and stability and ensure the safety of global commons in cooperation with other regional and maritime forces. The countries of Asia have vast maritime interests, and the responsibility of protecting these assets fall on the maritime agencies as well as the navies of the region, because it is the responsibility of these maritime forces to ensure that the maritime interests of countries which have a vital relationship with the region's economic growth are allowed to develop unhindered both in peace and war, and that we continue to provide safe and secure seas for a resurgent nation. Thank you. Jai Hind.